Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this workshop brought to you by AWS and Codefresh. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting program ahead, but before we get that ball rolling, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review with you. First of all, we are recording today's session. So if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to watch again, follow along later, or maybe just share with your team, you will be receiving a link via email to access the recording on demand. If you'd like to engage with us, and I'm sure you will, there are a couple of options for you to do so. The first option is the chat tab on the right side of your screen, and I'd like you to start testing that function out for us right now by letting us know from where in the world you are joining us. Now, if you have any specific questions, we want you to direct those questions to the Q&A. I know this is going to be a pretty interactive panel, especially if you're following along. So please do engage with us in one of those two ways. Will have a couple of polls that will launch throughout today's program. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch the first one while I'm thinking about it. And we've got about two more that'll be following over the next minute or so. So please keep an eye out for those. We'd love to have your feedback. Additionally, there are some handouts available for you in the Handouts tab. And these are mostly just to kind of help you follow along with our program today. So if there are handy links that are mentioned, they're either in the handouts or they will be posted in the chat as we go. Of course, before we close things out, we are also giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of our conversation. All right, the focus of this workshop is modernizing AWS software delivery to Lambda, EC2, EKS, and more with CI/CD and GitOps. And I'm joined today by Dan Garfield, co-founder and chief open source officer at Codefresh, Kostas Kapolonis, senior developer evangelist at Codefresh, and helping us out off screen is Marina Novakova, senior partner solutions architect at AWS. So Marina, Dan, and Kostas, thank you all so much for joining me today. Dan, do you want to get this workshop started?
Yep, we're going to kick things off. So I'm excited to have all you here with us, and good workshop put together here, mostly by Kostas and Marina. They did all the heavy lifting, and so they'll be available in the chat to answer everything. Now, as we go through this workshop, there's probably about 3 hours worth of content for you to actually get through to do it all. So the way that we're going to structure this, because we have about an hour today and we want to help out with questions and everything, is we're going to be going through parts of the workshop. We're going to be showing what you're going to be doing. We're going to show how it works and how the workshop operates. And huge thank you to AWS for providing the lab environment for us and everything so that we can do this. And with that, let me introduce what Codefresh is. So if you're not familiar with Codefresh, we are a next generation CI/CD tool built for cloud native applications. What does cloud native mean? Really, it means Kubernetes, it means serverless, it means microservices, it means containers. Basically that approach where, maybe it's not VM first, it's more services oriented first. So what we do is we have a couple of components in our platform. We have CI/CD pipelines, so you can use these to build your applications, test them. There's live debugging, so you can actually set breakpoints in your pipeline. There's built-in caching, so it's super fast. But then we actually tie this into the delivery side. So you have a GitOps tool set, and we'll explain a little bit about what GitOps is if you're not familiar with it. And within this tool set, you can actually deploy a GitOps agent or use a hosted one that we provide. This is actually built on Argo CD. We're maintainers. Kostas and I are both Argo maintainers, and we work on that project. It's what our platform is built on. And we provide this GitOps toolkit that will allow you to deploy your applications and monitor them all within this suite, and then have everything tied together into a single dashboard. So you're going to see what that looks like. Now, you're going to want to stick around until the end because we have some giveaways. Now, many of you already know about the GitOps Champions program. This is Codefresh offers the world's most active, fastest growing, and most beloved GitOps certification. And we are going to be offering you 100% off free code for both levels, both the fundamentals and GitOps at scale. And you'll get an invite to our Discord community, which is just a thriving community of people who are all doing certification, who are doing this stuff in practice. You can ask us questions. So lots to hang on to. So that's going to be exclusive at the end. We're going to be showing that code so you can sign up for that and get that free certification, which honestly is probably worth thousands of dollars, though we charge quite a bit less. But getting it for free will definitely be a nice bonus. So with all that being said, let me share my screen and we're going to kick off this presentation. All right. So let's see. Are you able to see my screen? I can't tell if people are saying yes. Yes, Costa says, gives me a thumbs up. All right. So we're going to be looking at this. This is the codefresh.awsworkshop.io if you're not already here. And now the prerequisites for this, you're going to need to have a GitHub account, a Docker Hub account, an AWS account. Now this one, you're actually just going to be using this free temporary one for our event. So you'll go to this AWS event, you'll click on this, and when you click on this navigate engine, you're going to put in a special one-time code. So you'll fill out the information and you'll put in a special hash right here. And that hash is going to be in the chat. So Marina's going to post that so you have it available, or it should be in your email if not. And you'll be able to use this to fire up your environment. Once you get in there, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to configure Cloud9. This is going to provide you with a workshop environment. Just follow these instructions. To create it, you'll need to install kubectl. You'll need to install the Codefresh CLI. And as part of this, you're going to need to create a Codefresh account. And if you haven't done that yet, you should definitely do that. Just go to codefresh.io and you can create an account there. You can log in with GitHub or with Google or whatever. It floats your boat. And you'll need a Docker Hub account. And you're going to want to connect that to your Codefresh account, which is very easy to do. You're just going to go to settings. You just follow these instructions, really. You're going to go to settings and the account integration view here, and then you'll create a registry and call it Docker Hub. So that's all you got to do. And then finally, once you're ready, you can actually create a Kubernetes cluster on your account. So there's instructions for how to do that. Basically, you're going to put in this EKS control create cluster. That's going to take about 30 minutes. Now, like I said, today's session is an hour. So we're going to skip ahead. I've already created a cluster, and we're going to be able to start showing you how this stuff is going to work. So the goal is really to streamline our software delivery. So we want to have easy creation of CI/CD pipelines so that every time we make a change, we can automatically build our container, we can run our tests, we can do all those operations, and then we're going to push the image up to a registry. And then we're also going to show you different ways to deploy it. And depending on time, we'll go more or less in depth. And as we go, feel free to throw in questions. Marina and Kostas are going to be helping answer those questions. And I can't see the chat from where I'm looking at. So please just Marina or Kostas, feel free to interrupt at any point, and we can address those things. So let's kick off with the continuous integration section. So with this, we've put together a sample application for you to work with. So let's go to the build container exercise. And what you're going to do is we're going to create a pipeline, and it's going to be very simple. It's going to check some code out from Git. It's going to build a Docker image, and it's going to store that Docker image in a registry. We're going to be using Docker Hub. Now, you could use ECS. ECS is excellent, but you can really use any container registry you want to use. And so to do this, first thing we're going to do is we're going to need to fork our workshop repositories. So here I've got my workshop repository. And the reason I'm going to need to fork this is because I'm actually going to be making edits to some of the configuration and some of the build information that's in here. Now, you can see right now it says fork 3. So that's just really the 3 of us that tested this beforehand. And as I refresh it, I didn't expect to see people start to fork it. But I've got my fork here, so I'm going to click on my fork. And I'm going to be working off of this public repo here that I've got going. All right, so now I'm going to go into Codefresh and I'm going to create my Codefresh project. So projects within Codefresh are basically a way of organizing information. And you can see I've already created one called AWS Workshop 2023. You know, you'd give it a name, you give it some tags, you select, an icon, and we went with the AWS one, and you hit create, and you'll get your project created here. Now that we've created our project, we're going to create a new pipeline. And the new pipeline, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do basic pipeline, and I'm going to do basic pipeline 1 because I've actually already done this. And I'm going to select my fork, and you can see I've already logged in with GitHub, so it has access to my repo here. So I'm going to hit that, and I'll hit create, and this is going to create a pipeline for me. Now, this basic pipeline, the Codefresh YAML is very easy to work with. So you can see I've got a couple of stages for my pipeline. And as I go through these steps, you can see I've got these stages assigned. So this is going to group the steps together. And all I'm doing here is I'm going to be running a clone, but we're actually going to replace this one. But you can see that each step it's just a simple YAML. So it has a step, and a name, and then a type, and then some arguments for that specific step. But we're going to be working with this example here. So I'm going to copy this and throw it inside of my CI pipeline here. So you can see I'm cloning a repo, good. And then I'm going to be building my image. Now, earlier I mentioned that you're going to need to have your own registry added, and mine, I actually didn't name Docker Hub. You're going to name yours Docker Hub because that's what the instructions say, but I'm a rebel, so I don't always follow the instructions because I like to do more work. And then you're going to need to make sure that you need to replace your image name repository. This represents which repository it's going to use, and I'm going to be using my Today Was Awesome Docker Hub, so I'm just going to change that image name, and now I'm done. I've created this pipeline. Now you're going to be able to see that actually under triggers, this has automatically created a trigger so that every time I make a commit to this repo, this pipeline will automatically run. Now, of course, I could modify this and I can add all kinds of arguments. But one of the nice things about this setup is you can do what are called shared pipelines. So this is where I create a single pipeline for many services, and I create additional triggers. Basically, each trigger for each service is how that works. So if I could have 500 services that are all using the same CI pipeline. Now, I've got my pipeline set up to build this image and clone the repo. I've updated it, and we could run that, and it would just show us that it clones and builds the image. But we want to do a little bit more than that. We're going to be adding some tests. So I'm going to skip through. This is showing us what my image looks like, which is great. And we're going to be able to see it on Docker Hub, which is great. But we're going to add some tests to this as well. So to add some tests, we just need to add a unit test step. So you can see I've got my run unit test step, title unit test, and it's going to run an image, which is going to be Maven because this is a Java instance. And then I'm going to be running a Maven command to run the test, and all I need to do is specify where that Maven repository lives, which is going to be on a Codefresh volume. This is one thing I didn't mention. When you create a Codefresh pipeline, each one of these steps is going to be able to attach. It's going to automatically attach to and have access to a single shared volume. And we're going to use this as the background for caching. So we'll actually take that volume, we'll cache it, we'll store it, and reattach it on subsequent runs. And so anything that's in that shared volume is going to be reattached. And this is going to provide the backend for our caching mechanism. It's going to do this automatically. And there are all kinds of rules built in for how that volume is attached to make it really easy. So once we've added our unit tests, we're going to add in some security scanning. So we're going to be using Aquasec Trivy. This is a free open source security scanning tool, and it's going to run the command Trivy image, and it's going to scan, but with our username, right? We have to replace our username in there so it knows which image to scan. And of course, we could parameterize this out, but just to show you how it all works. And once this scanning runs, it'll find actually some vulnerabilities for us, which is great. So it's going to be working. And then we're going to do some integration testing. And now this one is really interesting because what we're doing actually is, again, we're running this image, this Java image, but we're doing it with a service where we're adding a composition for our application that we built, and it's going to be running tests against that image. So we can actually bring in, if we needed to do a database, we could add in a database here. We could have any kinds of these services, and we can actually do that as part of our pipeline. So once we've put that all together, you'll have a YAML that will look like this. It's going to clone the repo, run the unit test, build the image, scan the image, run integration testing, and be done. And there is a flag here, which is going to tell you that when you run this pipeline, you're going to want to use a medium instance. Java takes some memory. So within our pipeline, I'm going to go over my pipeline over here, and under my settings, I'm going to select my build runtime and make sure I select a medium pipeline. Otherwise, the pipeline will just hang for a long time as it's not able to, the Java tests aren't able to complete. Once you've got that all in there, so you can see I've actually got a workflow here, and it's set up to run unit tests, build the image, scan the image, and everything. And I've already updated all of these elements with my username. So let's go ahead and run this. And that's going to kick off our build. So while that's running, any questions so far? How are we doing? I see some people are coming from Chicago, from Toronto, from Iowa, Bulgaria. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I see that Marina is already answering lots of questions in the background. So we're doing great. Now, as this runs, like I said, the caching is going to kick in and provide caching for us, but it'll still take 3 minutes. Our time is precious. So let's just look at a previous build that's already completed. Right here, I've got one that I ran just this morning. And you can see that if I look at my unit tests, I can see all my unit tests that ran. If I go over to my integration tests, I can actually see the logs from the different services that I have provided. And that's all running smoothly. So I've got my image building and we're rocking and rolling. And if I look under my artifacts and I look under images, I'm going to be able to see the image that I built here. And you can see I've got some different tags for the different images that I've built. And if I open these guys up, I can examine the Docker file and I can look at the layers of the image and see what's going on and what's taking space. Yeah, go ahead, Marina.
Then, since we're talking about Docker file, and as I see like 56% mentioned they are not familiar with Argo CD or have never used it. Can we talk a little bit about what the actually Argo CD Codefresh benefits and why we're talking about Docker and how specific features helping actually with containers deployments?
Yes, that's a great question. So let me actually, what I'm going to do in my Codefresh account, I'm actually going to jump over to another account to show you what the end result is going to be. Then we'll show you how to get there. If I jump over to this other account, and this is an account that's very active. You can see this organization is deploying all the times. There's very frequent updates happening here. The way that GitOps works is you essentially have, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show you my run times here. So you have a GitOps operator. And so in this one, we're going to be using the Codefresh hosted. So you can see I've got this Codefresh hosted operator. Now this is basically Argo CD. And what it does is it looks at a Git repo as a source of truth, and then it compares it against the environments that it's managing. You can see I have quite a few Kubernetes environments here that I've added. And it's going to be looking for changes to Git and then applying them to the repository, to our environment as a matter of policy. So if somebody came along and they updated production without committing it to Git, we would actually capture that using our GitOps operator, and it would automatically be overwritten. We would overwrite that change. Now you can change the settings on that, but that means that every change that goes through has to go through Git. So that means you always know exactly what's running. You have an agent that's always checking and making sure that what's running is what you expect to be running, and you have a policy engine that can basically overwrite changes if they happen to production. And this means that you always have a single source of truth in Git, and you always have verification that what you've defined as your source of truth is running. And we found that when people adopt this model, as opposed to a traditional CI/CD model, which we'll show you, they are actually able to deploy more frequently. They have a lot more confidence in their deployments. They have a lot more predictability, and you have fewer failures as a result of misconfiguration. One of the most common issues that happens for people that are deploying using just CI/CD pipelines is when you try to make a change to the environment where the environment doesn't actually reflect what you expect it to. And that causes downtime and failures and unpredictable changes. Hopefully that answers that question. So coming back over to my account here. We're gonna kind of build this up, right? So we've built our CI/CD pipeline, and we've got our image building and pushing to Docker Hub. So now we need to deploy it. So the traditional way to do this would be to do something like an EC2 deployment using a pipeline or Lambda deployment. Of course, we're gonna be showing you the GitOps deployment. So maybe what we can do is, we're 20 past. Kostas, could you give us like in less than 10 minutes, just kind of explain these EC2 and Lambda demos, and I'll pass the sharing off to you, and then we're going to show you the GitOps deployment.
Yes, thank you, Dan. So the most traditional method is, creating a virtual machine, and you can do this in many different ways. Some people just create the machine and then they start an FTP process or an SSH process. But the demo I'm going to show you today is actually using another open source project, which is called Packer from HashiCorp. And this actually has a very interesting idea where instead of deploying a virtual machine and then sending your application there in some way, instead it bakes a virtual machine with the application itself. So you create a brand new image just for you, that is your base image, let's say Ubuntu or Linux or something like this, plus your application. So here is an example pipeline. I'm not going to run it because it takes 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the finished state. And essentially, if we look at the source code, this is my application. It's a super simple Go application, just a file. And here I have a Packer file that says, hey, I'm going to create a virtual machine. There is first a section that explains what I'm going to use as a starting point. So I'm going to use Ubuntu. And then it says, in this Ubuntu image, go and create a brand new image that has your application. So I'm creating a new image on the spot. So I'm running the pipeline, and first it does the same things that Dan talked about. It clones first my repository, then it compiles the Go application. So you can see here I'm using my Go image and Go build. And all the magic happens in this baking VM step, which just calls Packer. So here I'm saying take from Docker Hub the official Packer image and run it. And this creates a new AMI. So I've already run this. And if I go into my AWS console, you can see it has the public images plus the one that I just created. So this is the image I created that started from Ubuntu, but now it also contains my application. This is important because now I can say if I want 10 VMs or 20 VMs, I don't have to start 20 VMs and then starting, copying my application there. I can start 20 VMs and my application is already there. This is the concept also of immutable infrastructure, if you want to know more about this. So after I'm finished with this step, then I'm just using the AWS CLI. So this is just, the same thing that you could do locally, which essentially I'm saying, take this image that you just created and launch it. So this pipeline has finished, and this is my own AMI. And if I go to my instances, you can also see if I search, I think I'm named it Codefresh. I think I should have some already launched. Let's try to refresh it again. So yeah, from Codefresh. Okay, so these are the VMs, and you can see in this example, I've already run it 3 times. It's 3, and I know it's the exact same VM. It's the VM that has Ubuntu plus my application. There are no errors with copying or not copying. So if you aren't familiar with Packer, I think it's a super interesting project, and essentially it makes super easy the creation of VM images that have your application there. So that's the first example regarding EC2. And then I have another example for serverless. And again, in serverless, I'm going to use another open source project also by HashiCorp, which is Terraform. And I think most people should be familiar with Terraform. It's a super useful tool. Essentially, it follows the concepts of infrastructure as code. So instead of using a CLI and just running commands and expect the process to finish, here you explain the end result. You say, I want this, and then Terraform does whatever needs to be done. This one actually, I think it's a bit faster, so maybe I will run it while I'm talking and we can see the end result. And if I go again to my example, and this is on the same public repository in GitHub, first of all, I have my Terraform file. And if you're not familiar with Terraform, it's not exactly JSON. It's a language specific to Terraform, which is called HCL, and it's similar to JSON, but it's interesting that it's declarative. So it doesn't, say do this, do that. Here I have a definition. I'm using the official AWS module, so you don't need to write anything by yourself. It's already done in the Terraform marketplace. And I'm saying, hey, I'm going to create a Lambda function. And here I'm creating everything that the Lambda function needs, so all the resources. And there are multiple ways that you can create a Lambda function. Maybe you have a Docker file or a container, but here I'm doing the most simple thing. I'm saying I will just zip my application and send it. And again, the example, if you actually look at the source code, it's not like Java or Go, so I don't even need to compile it. It's the most simple example ever. So here, I'm just having, the declarative stuff, like what I want to do. And then I can go into Codefresh, and I have a super simple pipeline. So you see Lambda is very easy to set up, but just says, hey, clone the repository. And then all I'm doing is saying run Terraform. And I think this is also shows the power of Codefresh, that if you have seen, many traditional solutions, people are complaining because, let's say, a new Terraform version comes out, and then you need to go in all your runners and try to find which Terraform version your runners have and try to update. But because Codefresh is using this approach of Docker containers, where each step is a Docker container, you can see just right now that the Terraform version is defined in my pipeline. So if tomorrow, let's say, an engineer wants to use another Terraform version, they don't need to do anything strange. They can go into the pipeline and run it. So if we look at the output of this, this has already finished, and I have actually used as an output. Terraform has the option to use outputs. What is the link of the Lambda? And if we go there, hopefully we will see the demo that it says hello world from Lambda. And I will close this example saying that one of the benefits of Terraform is that Terraform knows what is deployed and what is not deployed. So it keeps track of the state of your resources, and it's also super easy to destroy things. So this was my deploy pipeline, but here I have another pipeline which is very similar, but this time it calls destroy. So I don't need to track myself what needs to be deleted when I'm going to delete my function. I'm just calling this pipeline, and AWS knows, obviously, what is deployed. Terraform is asking AWS, hey, I'm keeping a list of these resources. Are they still there? Okay, they are there. Now I don't need them anymore, and it removes them. So destroying a thing is super easy because, Terraform knows what was created, and now it can also destroy it, which I think it's a super interesting concept. Several times you create several resources, and then when you are trying to delete them, you say, okay, I deleted most of them, and I forget some of them, or you miss some of them. So I think Terraform is super interesting in this aspect. And you can see how easy also it is to use Terraform with Codefresh. So that's it, super fast.
Perfect. Well done. That you did it in 8.5 minutes, just like I asked. Thank you. So for everyone watching this, we've shown you a couple of things, and I know this is really rapid fire, and so hopefully everybody's following along. As you go through the workshop yourself, we're kind of showing these different highlights, right? So we built a container, right? We built our application. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about the application, but we built it. We've automated that now using our CI/CD pipeline. Costas just showed us 2 ways that we can extend those pipelines to deploy, either using Packer, if we're just deploying to an EC2 instance, we're just deploying a VM, or deploying using functions, using serverless, using Terraform. Now, it doesn't matter if we're actually deploying serverless. we're deploying Terraform, and hey, we could deploy a lot of stuff that way. So the next level that we want to show you, and we'll spend a little more time on this one, is deploying using GitOps. So Terraform is really excellent for creating long-running objects or services that don't change very frequently. GitOps is typically for our application layer especially. Things that change often, things that change frequently. So if we have services that we're deploying, we're making changes all the time. Things where there's adaptability going on. So that's what we're going to be using GitOps for. So GitOps as a standard was something that we helped create a few years ago. It's called Open GitOps. You can find the standards at opengitops.dev. I'll throw it in the chat here. .dev. And we actually have 4 principles that explain what GitOps is, why it's important. But if we follow these principles, which basically deal all with how we define a source of truth, how that's applied, how we look for changes, those kinds of things, we're actually going to find that we're going to be more productive as a team. So we're going to show you how to implement that. And like I said, this workshop actually walks through the entire process. So as you follow along and implement it yourself, you're going to actually end up with an entire GitOps flow. So let me share my screen again. And if you don't see my screen, give a shout. All right, so here I've now back to this GitOps deployment section. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a GitOps agent. Now, a good 25% of you mentioned that you're familiar with Argo CD. Argo CD is an open source GitOps engine. So it basically allows you to define your source of truth in Git, set a target for where you want that source of truth to be reflected, an environment, a Kubernetes cluster, and then it will automatically reconcile this for you. Now, we're going to be using Codefresh to do this because there's a lot of wonderful enterprise level tools to really make our lives easier when we're using this kind of stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fire up our runtime. So when you get into Codefresh, you're going to be hit with this welcome screen, and you're going to hit Enable Hosted GitOps. And this is going to take you over to a screen where you can install a runtime, and you're going to select Hosted Runtime. It'll automatically be set up for you, and you'll just hit Add. Now, I've actually already done that. It'll just take a minute or two to launch this. And this is actually creating a Kubernetes cluster that Codefresh is running with Argo CD, with the enterprise version of Argo CD from Codefresh running on it, along with some other tools. And we can use this to deploy and manage all of our applications. So you're going to see then it's going to prompt you to connect to Git provider, and you'll click that, and it'll have you log in with GitHub, or you can add a token. And the reason we're doing this is because Codefresh is going to actually allow you to create resources in the UI that are created in Git. So in this case, you can see I actually have a Git source repo that's been created, and this Git source repo reflects everything that should be running for my hosted runtime. So I can always recover it later if I needed to. I can add additional Git sources as well. And then finally, we need to add a cluster to connect to. Now, you're going to create your EKS cluster as part of the flow. You can do this in Cloud9, and you can follow along all of this in Cloud9. I'm going to be doing this just in my CLI just because of what I've set up here. And so to do this, I'm going to go to Connect and make sure my CLI is installed. If it's not, I've already got it installed. So all I need to do is run this cf cluster add Codefresh hosted. Now, why do I need to run this as a terminal command? The reason that I need to do that is because I'm going to be relying on my kubeconfig connection to actually create a job in my Kubernetes cluster that's going to create new tokens, authentication, and then send it to Codefresh so it can connect. So I'm going to copy this command. We'll run it. It's going to have me specify which Kubernetes cluster I want to use. And you can see I'm going to be using my basic EKS cluster that I created for this workshop. Now, if you're doing this in Cloud9, you should only have one option. And like I said, this creates the job, creates some secrets, and then we'll send this information over to Codefresh. So once I've got that done, you can see I've already got my managed cluster right here. So it's going. Now, if I go back over to my GitOps apps, I'm not going to have too much going on yet because I've just created my cluster. You can see it is aware of my Git source application. Now, what this is, when you create an application within Argo CD, within Codefresh, it's essentially a set of policies. So let me show you what that looks like. So if we go over and look at our instructions, we're going to be creating our basic application. So we've already added our cluster, and we're ready to do our first deployment. So to do this, we're going to be using our forked account, my AWS Workshop demos. So I'm going to name this with hosted demo. Hosted demo. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to select my Codefresh hosted runtime. And this is going to create a YAML, hosted demo.yaml. And as I go through the wizard here, here I can specify where the source of truth is for this. I'm going to pick my workshop demos, and I'm going to change my path to simple Helm chart. Now, what's in here? Let me just show you really quick. If I look under the simple Helm chart, you can see I actually have a Helm chart that's running with a values file that specifies my image and which tag is going to be deployed. And when you get this, it's going to be forked from that main repository. So it'll look similar to this, except it will be deploying Costas's version of the image. And so you'll need to edit when you're ready. But just to start, we're just going to deploy what's there already. So got my simple Helm chart. I could deploy it to any namespace. I'm going to pick default. And now you can see the sync settings. So self-heal means if something changes in my cluster, Argo is automatically going to overwrite those changes. I actually want that because I want this to be the source of truth. I want it to be Git as the source of truth. I'm also going to set up prune resources. You don't have to do this, but this means that if something is deleted from Git, it'll automatically be deleted from my cluster. So use that one with caution. I have seen some people get into trouble with that one when they didn't expect it to work. You could use auto create namespace if you're deploying to a namespace that doesn't exist yet. And we have some other options here, but we're going to skip those for now. This is actually going to generate a YAML. Here's what the YAML looks like. This is a custom resource that is understood by Argo. And when I commit this, you can notice that if you're using Argo CD, if you've only used Argo CD, the community version, you don't have a commit button. You have a save button. So it just saves it to the cluster. It doesn't commit it to a Git repo. So if it's deleted from the cluster, it's just lost. But we're going to be good GitOps citizens. We're going to be putting everything into Git. So I'm going to hit commit here. And this is going to commit it to my runtime applications and generated a commit message for me. So that's all fine. I'm going to hit commit. And within 10 to 30 seconds, we'll see this application will actually pop up. So what it's doing behind the scenes is it's creating that YAML, it's committing it to the repository, and then Argo CD is going to automatically pick up that that application exists and it needs to be synced to my cluster. So we should see that pop up any second now. In the meantime, feel free to get some questions in, and we'll get this moving. Usually within about 10 seconds. Should have happened by now. Just give it a refresh. Oh, there it goes. My screen just wasn't refreshing. Okay. So you can see it's already created my hosted demo, and it's actually already deployed the application. It's created the deployment, the replica set, the pod. I could go in here and I can look at the logs or look at the events and all that kind of stuff. So if you're using Argo CD today, this should look very familiar. And if we go back to our application dashboard, if I look at the card view, this is something most people do. This should look very, very familiar to you. Now we add a couple of things because one, you can see I actually have the runtime listed on each application. That's because I could have many runtimes, and I'll actually show you that in a second. If I look at my application again, we also introduced the concept of a timeline, and this is going to show me all the deployments that I've ever done to this application. Now you can see, even though I just created this application, I actually had created it earlier, and then I deleted it. And now when I brought it back, I actually can see the full history of it. So if I wanted to play a new version of this, now as part of your workshop, you're actually going to do this, right? So what we would have you do is you can actually go and make an edit to your application. So if I go over to my simple Java app here, and I look at, we can go to this sample actuator. Sure, we can do that. Main resources. Oh wait, what's the path again? Under source main Java sample. Source main Java sample actuator. There it goes. And then we can look at the hello world service. And you could make any change. I mean, the change isn't necessarily important, but we can have this display a different message here, for example. So from an AWS workshop container. And if I commit this, this is going to automatically kick off a build, right? So let's go back to our build, our pipeline, our builds, sorry. And we'll see that this has kicked off a build. Here it is. And this is the build that we made earlier, right? The CI pipelines. It's going to clone the repo, make the test, run the integration tests. Now, when I'm ready, I can just grab this image SHA, and I'll just grab one that from when we built a little bit earlier. And if I go to my repo and I look at my Helm chart, I can just update this values file and I can put in a new tag. And when I commit that, this is going to automatically be picked up by my GitOps app right here, and will automatically deploy a new version. So you can actually see the latest version 3 minutes ago. Now, right now, autosync is on. So this should pick up and automatically deploy that new version, assuming I committed it. I think I did. Yeah, it looks like I committed it. Now, of course, if we want to speed it up, we can always hit refresh. It is nice when it just happens. Oh, there it goes. 12 seconds ago, you can see it's kicking off, and it's already healthy and up and running. Now, the big advantage of using this timeline, I'm going to show you actually in a different account. If I go to my Aperture Science account, which, like I mentioned, has a lot of activity, I'm going to show you an application with a little bit more history and a little bit more going on. So I'm going to look at this Trio app prod app, and you can see there's quite a bit more going on in this application. There's a lot more to find. And if I look at my timeline, I can see a full history of all my deployments, including when some failed. And I can actually see that today we had 5 deployments. And if I wanted to go back and look, I could go back at any point. I can see which applications were updated, so which services were updated. And what it's done here is it's actually said, okay, these are the images that were updated in these applications. Therefore, we can see which part of the which microservices were updated. And it's looking at these images and it's saying, okay, these images are actually all associated with this pull request right here. They're all associated with this Jira issue. So I could jump straight into Jira and see what was going on. And they're associated with these specific CI builds. So it actually ties back to the pipeline that built my application. So you have this full history of what's going on. And it goes back and forwards. And now these ones are actually using Canary releases. So I can see the Canary deployment happened where it set the weight of and did health checks and all that stuff. I can get all that information. And if I needed to go back and do a rollback, I can actually just do a git revert inside of Git to remove the commit, and it will automatically be reflected and deployed up here.
Then
so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, since you mentioned Canary deployed, and I know some people asking question what the benefit Argo CD and why Argo CD underneath the Codefresh. Probably we need to point a little bit like what is actually real GitOps. And you mentioned Canary deployment. Probably what deployment strategies you automatically support in Codefresh, right? And how do you support automatic rollback? As a part of the GitOps, what you just mentioned. Can you just elaborate a little bit and educate us on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a deployment strategy standpoint, the deployment we did at the very beginning using GitOps was just a simple Kubernetes rolling update. So as pods are brought online, it's going to bring the old pods offline. Super simple, super easy. Now here I've actually got a Canary going where it's exposing a percentage of my users to a new version. And then as long as the health checks are passed, it's increasing the percentage of traffic that's exposed until it's 100%, and then it shuts down the old pods. We also have blue-green, where it brings up in the new service, brings everything 100% up, makes sure your health checks pass, and then it switches all the traffic at once. So both of those options are available. Now, if you're using Argo CD and you're using the community version today, and I'm sure in the users in the chat, it looked like we had about 25% of people that are doing that. That's awesome. I'm thrilled. Like I said, Costas and I are maintainers on that project. We work on it regularly, and we really want the open source to be and the community version to be super valuable. Within the enterprise version, the differences are mostly related to scale and visibility. So if you're using Argo CD by itself, you can define your source of truth, set up your environment, and let it run, and it's going to automatically be deploying new versions as soon as their changes are made in Git. But as you scale and you have more and more clusters and you have more and more runtimes you need to deal with, typically people end up needing to run many instances of Argo and Argo CD. And so Codefresh provides a single control plane so that all of those runtimes can be managed from a single UI, single view. Our Argo CD is any edits that are made within the Argo CD UI are only going to the cluster and updating custom resources. They're not being made to Git. So Codefresh makes every change, anything that you're doing in the UI is automatically going to be committed to Git. So you always have your source of truth. And then, like I mentioned, we add this concept of a timeline. So you get much more information about what's happening with your deployments and what's going on there. And the cool thing about this traceability is that it goes both ways. So earlier I showed you the image view where we were looking at what images I had built, and I could drill down on those. Well, this image view, if I actually look at, let's say, for example, this Flask UI image, I can actually see which versions are currently deployed and where. So if I look at my currently deployed, I can see that I currently actually have 4 versions deployed, and each of these are currently just deployed in different environments. So this allows me to get a holistic view of my images, what versions I currently have running, where they're running, why they're running, and I can actually see, here's the application where this is running, and I could just click onto those applications and jump straight into the commit and see what's going on. So a lot more visibility, a lot more information.
Yeah, I think Kostas just took another question. People wanted to see more demo of integrations. So, and we have one more, and I'll probably take it, and feel free, Kostas, then to step in. So what CI/CD tool platform selection criteria from the cloud service providers, AWS code commit, pipelines, build, deploy, or GCP, CI/CD cloud services versus CI/CD platform provided by different vendors? What the pros and cons of having native CI/CD pipeline provided by different cloud service providers? Well, your question actually has answers. As like these CI/CD tools, they are native to the cloud providers. They design it to be closely integrated with like our service and our tooling. But when it comes to more like broader in the complex cases as a hybrid environments, because we have like customers migrating from on-prem to cloud, or they multi-cloud, right? The tooling, native tooling might be extremely limited. Plus, is like we have a specific amount of integrations and specific capabilities, but it doesn't mean it has everything you need. So it's all come to like your specific team needs. And it all comes to like what features and what additional capabilities you need. For example, AWS code commit, amazing. If you like completely use IAM and all on AWS, but it's not as easy usable as a GitHub if you have a like contribution project, right? The same as you cannot do it like much on open source for code commits. On code commit, the same as code pipeline, code build, you can do GitHub and code commit, but you limited, for example, with the version control systems. So yeah, Dan, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, within the case of Codefresh, right, I mentioned at the very top, we're really focused on microservices, cloud native applications. So if you're running Kubernetes, you're running containers, you're you're building images and things like that. If you're running Terraform, Codefresh really is optimized for those flows. So we have built-in caching, shared pipelines, so you can create a single pipeline that works for 1,000 different services, so you're not recreating the same CI/CD pipeline over and over again. And then, of course, the GitOps element where you can monitor everything that's going on and make changes, do rollbacks, view the history, and then get the context. So from Codefresh's perspective, we're really trying to be fully integrated into AWS, into whatever other tooling that you're going to use, so that we can bring all that information to you so that you can operate your services more effectively, do rollbacks and all those kinds of things. Now, I mentioned at the top of the hour that we were going to be giving away a training and certification for this, for GitOps entirely. Now, today's workshop really focuses on AWS, building our containers, doing GitOps, using Codefresh, how it all works together. We've shown you most of the highlights. There is one more section that's after the GitOps section, which is on tying it all together. So we've shown you how all it goes together, but actually having an extra step in your pipeline so it makes the commit automatically, so that you make your change and everything just deploys automatically. All your testing happens and everything is refreshed automatically. Now, there's lots of possibilities and lots more to do, lots of capabilities within GitOps that we didn't touch on. So to take advantage of those, you're going to want to get the GitOps certification. We're just passing the 20,000 student mark. Like I said, it is the most popular certification for GitOps in the world and the fastest growing. This code expires in 48 hours. We do not give it away for free almost ever, but Marina vouched for all of you personally. She said, this group is really good. They need it. So you have this code, Modernizing 100, and the M is capitalized and it is case sensitive. So you can scan the QR code or go to learning.codefresh.io. I think Marina is for the people. Yes, that's right. You can go to learning.codefresh.io and sign up. I definitely recommend you do that sooner than later. Put in the code when you sign up, and you can get both these certification levels for free. I would select the bundle. It's a little bit easier that way. So with that, we've got about 8 minutes left, and so I think it's a good time to take questions and take stock. So what did we do? Well, we started off with our workshop. We checked out our Git repo. We set up our environment. We created a CI/CD pipeline to build our application that we were working on. We set up, we showed you some of the different deployment options you have. We set up our GitOps agent, so it's actually syncing automatically from our Git repo to our cluster, and we made updates and had them reflected and deployed automatically. So we've shown you how this all can go all the way to the end. So Monica's asking, how do I receive a follow-up? That's a great question. So if you would like to have a direct conversation, I would just go to codefresh.io and hit schedule demo up at the top right, and you can actually just select a time with somebody from the team and engage with them. You're going to get an email after you do the workshop, after you sign up for certification, that's going to say, hey, let us know if we can help you with anything. But the fastest way is definitely go and click on that schedule demo link if that's something you want to do. And everything we showed you today, I mean, that's all stuff you get in the free account. So it's not like, you necessarily have to be signing up for something huge, just to engage on this stuff. So it's, it's like GitHub, a lot of it's for free. Easy to start with. Great question, and thank you for bringing that. I see we've already answered quite a few questions as well, and the handouts are available. Any other questions that you all have, would be happy to answer those as we come to a close. And I know that some of you are probably trying to work on this workshop in the background, doing it by yourself, which is totally fine. Hopefully you guys have a great experience and it runs smoothly for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and join our Discord, join our GitOps champions. It's a great place to get help as you go along. And a huge shout out to Costas and Marina for putting all this together. I mean, all the demos are available. Costas just reposted the demo link so you can follow all these. And of course, you've got the workshop to work on. Baz, you're getting coupon is expired. Make sure that you've put the case in exactly as it shows, because If it doesn't come out exactly like that, it won't work. But let me look at it really quick and make sure that that coupon is still active. It is set up to expire within 48 hours, but generally it's pretty good. So let me go look. Modernizing 100% discount. Oh, you know what? I see there is an error. It's not pointing to the bundles. Hang on, let me update that. Okay, should be working now. Also, some of you who were go-getters, if you signed up early, if your Codefresh account, if you got a message that said this needs approval, those should all be processed now. And if not, please reach out. Monica's asking, who are the winners? All of you are the winners because all of you get the 100% off code. So it should be working now. Go ahead and hit it again. Please try again. I see a couple people saying, hey, it's not working. Sahil, you say, can you share the Discord link? So this is kind of an exclusive community. The way it works is once you sign up for certification, you'll get the Discord link. So we don't actually publish it outside of the certification because we want only people who are doing that certification, who are part of that community, to be part of it. Let's see, let me look. Okay, I haven't seen, I know you're trying to use this, the coupon code. You may have to reload and try again. And I do see that it is set up on all bundles right now. I see people saying, hey, I can't use the coupon. We just updated it, so you should be able to refresh the page and try again. I'm sorry to make you sign up twice or go through that twice, but you should be able to use it now. And maybe I'll go test it even.
Well, hey, Dan, while you go test that out, I know I've got an answer for that question as far as to who our winners are. I believe they were talking about our gift card winners.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, they're still all winners.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. But the 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Chanel I, Kusal F, Knut J, and Demetrio Z. You should receive communication from us in the next 48 hours to get that gift card. If you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder just in case it happens to get filtered out. All right, Dave, is that coupon code looking good?
Not sure yet. I'm waiting for somebody to say it's working for me. If you copy and paste it, make sure that you don't have any spaces in it. I actually am getting an error when I'm trying to use it. What's going on here? Let me look again.
I just updated the date. It was for today, so I put.
Oh, it was expiring.
Yeah, put more. I just did it, so now it should work.
Oh, I just overwrote your change then. Hang on.
Okay, but the important thing is the string. Like if you keep the string, we will make it work.
Okay, now try finally. Okay, so we had 2 issues with it. Okay, I've confirmed it's working. So I've checked it. It's working now. Sorry about that confusion.
It's confirmed. Probably say it works now. Yeah.
Everybody's saying, I'm trying. So you don't need to refresh the page. Just hit the button again and make sure. I see some people are posting and they're showing a code with it's modernizing lowercase m. That won't work. You gotta have the uppercase M. Modernizing 100 with an uppercase M, just as you see it here. All right, I see people now saying, hey, it's working. Thank you. Working. Okay, great. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining. If you haven't already, obviously follow us at Codefresh. You can find me on Twitter at todaywasawesome. And with that, I think we're ready to come to a close. Any parting words from anybody?
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Kostas, for amazing content.
Thank you. And if you want to attend more Codefresh events, I'll post a link here. We have quite a few coming up. We're doing a webinar tomorrow with the CNCF on using Argo rollouts with Gateway API. Kostas is giving a webinar on Thursday talking about choosing developer platforms. And then next week, we have another webinar just on doing CI/CD for Kubernetes applications. So there's always something happening. We've got interviews going on and big action there. So feel free to use that link and go check out the events and keep up with us on Twitter. And thank you again, Marina, for helping out. And Cody, thanks for all of your work hosting and organizing everything.
Yeah, of course. Happy to have all three of you, Kostas, Marina, and Dan, on with us. I know Marina's a superstar, but it was a pleasure to meet you other two.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I would like to thank AWS and Codefresh for sponsoring our program today. We couldn't have hosted our program without their support. And to everyone still with us, thank you so much for sticking around, making sure we got this coupon working for you. I do just want you to stick around for one more minute. After we close out, there will be a survey that pops up, and we would love to have your feedback there, whether it's about today's program or a suggestion for future topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Either way, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Bye, everyone.